London's Langham Hotel has a reputation built on absolute luxury, but hidden behind its grand Victorian facade is a history that most guests never hear about. Meet Annie. She is a 25-year-old British journalist who built her career on a single premise: ghosts aren't real. She travels to allegedly haunted locations with a trunk full of digital recording gear, attempting to replace paranormal myths with hard empirical data. Her target this time was room 333. Decades ago, a doctor and his new bride checked into this suite for their honeymoon. By the next morning, both were dead. The doctor murdered his wife in a fit of rage before taking his own life. People claim the doctor's spirit never left. But Annie viewed this tragedy as a case study. She planned to spend a single night in the room, record the silence, and move on to her next assignment the following morning. She believed her digital tools were an objective shield against folklore. To her, the violent history of Room 333 was just another story waiting for a logical explanation. The first anomalies were logistical. When Annie confirmed her reservation for Room 333, the receptionist's welcoming smile vanished. Her hands were visibly shaking as she bypassed the modern keycards and handed Annie an ice-cold, heavy brass key. Stepping off the elevator on the third floor changed the atmosphere entirely. Down in the lobby, the hotel was buzzing with life. Up here, it was silent. The wall lamps cast sickly yellow shadows, and the ancient floorboards groaned beneath the weight of the faded carpet. The heavy brass handle of room 333 was freezing to the touch. Pushing the dark wood door open, Annie was greeted by perfectly preserved Victorian decor. A massive antique canopy bed dominated the space, anchoring the room firmly in the 19th century. But the centerpiece of the room was a full-length oval mirror positioned directly across from the bed, reflecting the heavy, stagnant air of the suite. The room's heavy preservation created an immediate sense of isolation. For the first time on a case, Annie found herself cut off from the modern world she usually used to stay grounded. Annie immediately got to work, unpacking her defense mechanisms. She methodically arranged her tripods, angled her high-definition cameras to cover every corner, and tested her sensitive audio recorders. Every piece of equipment was a trap set to capture proof. With the digital watchdogs rolling, the evening slipped into a mundane routine. Annie ordered a quick sandwich, lit a small fire in the hearth to ward off the November chill, and eventually dozed off on the sofa. She woke to a sharp knock at the door. Through her groggy confusion, she heard a man's voice call out, "Room service, madam." Annie had already eaten, but she opened the door anyway to find a sharply dressed butler holding a silver serving tray. The butler insisted the order was hers. He reached out, lifted the heavy metal cloche, and revealed the dish. Resting on the china plate was Annie's own severed head. She let out a visceral scream, her eyes clamping shut in pure terror. But when her eyelids snapped open a fraction of a second later, the butler had vanished. The hallway was completely empty. Her logic was under attack. An impossible sight had just violated her reality. Terrified, she slammed the door shut, knowing she now had to rely entirely on her recording equipment to confirm her own sanity. Annie locked the deadbolt and scrambled to her camera setup. Her hands shook as she scrubbed through the digital files, desperate for the comforting glow of objective, pixelated evidence. But the technology failed her. The camera's main SD card was corrupted. Worse, her backup audio recorder had captured absolute silence. No knocking, no butler. The only sounds on the tape were the door opening and her own horrified screams. The digital clock hit 1 a.m. Despite the fire still blazing in the hearth, the temperature inside room 333 plummeted, turning her breath into a pale white mist. Desperate to ground herself, she rushed to the bathroom to splash cold water on her face. She looked up into the glass, and there he was. Standing directly behind her was the rotting figure of the Victorian doctor. His long, jagged fingernails were already reaching out for her throat. Her technology had failed. Annie was now trapped in a vacuum, forced to face the doctor's image without any of the digital proof she needed to explain it away. Pure survival instinct took over. Annie abandoned her gear, bolted for the exit, and grabbed the heavy brass handle. But it wouldn't turn. It felt as if someone had sealed the door from the outside. The electrical grid gave way to chaos. The room's lights began flickering violently. In those brief flashes of illumination, Annie saw the pale, rotting doctor stepping closer, his yellow eyes fixed on her. Out in the quiet hallway, hotel staff members froze. Blood-curdling screams were tearing through the heavy oak door. Realizing a guest was in extreme danger, they threw their shoulders against the wood and finally shattered the lock. They burst into the suite, expecting to find an attacker. Instead, they found Annie alone. The doctor was nowhere to be seen. This image shows the ornate mirror above the heavy marble fireplace in room 333. When the staff found Annie, she was standing in front of a mirror like this, screaming hysterically while violently smashing her forehead into the shattered glass. Room 333 functions as a psychological trap, an invisible force that compels the living to physically become part of its history. After being physically restrained by the staff, Annie woke up sedated in the hotel's medical wing. She insisted the dead doctor forced her into the glass. Later, a staff member revealed a chilling history. When the doctor murdered his wife, he didn't use a weapon. He killed her by repeatedly smashing her head into the mirror. Annie survived, but her worldview was permanently altered. Skepticism and high-tech sensors offer no protection when a location forces you to become the living evidence of its past.